Coming up, bad weather delays South Korea's space rocket blast-off. The original launch date is delayed by a day to Thursday this week, as heavy rainfall could cause logistical problems. Seoul and Washington vow a strong response to North Korea's potential nuclear test, as South Korea's Foreign Minister Park Jin and U.S. State Secretary Antony Blinken hold their first meeting in the U.S. capital. The allies warn that more provocations from the north will only lead to further isolation for the regime. Stocks tumble across Asian markets and Wall Street as investors offload shares, fearing further inflation in the U.S. and additional rate hikes this year. South Korea's main bourse falls to a 19-month low. The S&P 500 and Nasdaq approach bear territory, tumbling nearly 4%.
Hello and welcome to New Day at Arirang. It's Tuesday, June 14th, 8 a.m. here in Seoul, South Korea. I'm Lee Seung-jae.
I'm Also Young. Thank you ever so much for joining us this morning, because over the next hour, we'll be giving you a look at some of the biggest headlines of the day and experts' insights on key issues facing Korea and the rest of the world. Now, this just coming in, the scheduled second launch of the Nuri space rocket, which was set to take place on Wednesday, has been delayed to Thursday.
That's right. The Korea Aerospace Research Institute made the announcement just a few moments ago that due to unfavorable weather conditions, the rocket isn't cleared for launch. Now, previously, officials did say the launch window would be open from the 16th to the 23rd. We will have more updates on the situation as we get them.
South Korean Foreign Minister Park Jin and his American counterpart Antony Blinken held a joint press conference Monday, during which they vowed a united and firm response to North Korea's provocations. Our Kim Yo-sun reports.
The top diplomats of Seoul and Washington called for North Korea to refrain from staging additional provocations, highlighting that they will be met with a firm response.
We affirmed that any North Korean provocations, including a nuclear test, will be met with a united and firm response from our alliance and the international community.
In a joint press briefing held on Monday, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken warned that the North has completed preparations for a possible nuclear test. He then added that if conducted, it will be met with a swift response. Blinken also reiterated that Washington remains committed to engaging in dialogue with the North.
And let me emphasize that the United States has absolutely no hostile intent toward the DPRK. We're open to dialogue without preconditions. We want to support the people of North Korea, including with COVID-19 vaccines.
The two also emphasized that Seoul, Washington, and Japan are maintaining close coordination in order to respond to North Korean threats. This was the first meeting between the two top diplomats since South Korean Foreign Minister Park Jin took office last month. Park is on a 4-day trip to the U.S., during which he plans to meet with U.S. congressional leaders and experts at think tanks. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
The U.S. stock sell-off intensified on Monday, plunging into bear market territory as recession fear grew ahead of this week's upcoming Fed meeting. Meanwhile, inflation worries worsened in May, with U.S. consumers expressing a negative outlook. Lee Rae-yeon has more.
U.S. stocks plunged into a bear market on Monday. This comes as a Wall Street Journal report suggested that the Federal Reserve would consider raising interest rates by 0.75 percentage points on Wednesday. The Dow sank 876 points, or 2.8%. The broader S&P fell 3.9%, now over 20% below its all-time high set in January, putting stocks into bear market territory. The Nasdaq was down by 4.7%. But it's not just stock market investors that are ditching riskier assets in the face of rising rates. According to price tracking website CoinMarketCap, the cryptocurrency market value on Monday dropped below the $1 trillion mark for the first time since January 2021. Crypto Bitcoin was down over 66% from its all-time high of over $69,000 in November 2021. What makes the situation even trickier is ongoing inflation. U.S. consumer inflation expectations for 1 year from now worsened in May. The survey released by the New York Fed on Monday showed the median expectation for inflation rose 0.3 percentage points from April to 6.6%. And 3 years from now, unchanged, standing at 3.9%. This new projection comes on the heels of the May's Consumer Price Index, a broad measure of the price of everyday goods like gasoline, groceries, and rent, which rose 8.6% in May from a year ago. Lee Hyun, Arirang News.
South Korea's main bourse KOSPI closed at its lowest in 18 months, mainly due to spiking consumer prices in the United States. Investors fear that this will lead to more aggressive tightening by the Fed and stunt global economic growth. Yu-jin with more.
South Korea's benchmark KOSPI couldn't dodge the bullet either. It fell to the lowest point in 18 months on Monday's close, plunging 91.36 points to 2,504.51, while the tech-heavy Kosdaq also fell 41.09 points to end at 828.77. Sharp falls were being tracked on Wall Street from Friday. Rising prices of gas, food, and services in the U.S. have all pushed up inflation to a 4-decade high. Consumer prices there have surged 8.6% in May from a year earlier. And what's even worse is that now pressure is on the U.S. Fed to raise rates again and more aggressively, which could force other countries to take more monetary tightening measures. And with clogged supply chains worldwide, along with the war in Ukraine, South Korea is no exception to the fears of inflation. In fact, a recent report from the World Bank made clear that high inflation is a global problem that could slow economies around the world. Investors, meanwhile, are expecting this downward trend to continue for the KOSPI at least for a while. They're also keeping a close eye on the Fed's 2-day rate-setting meeting, which starts on Tuesday. Lee Ji-yoon, Arirang News.
The lack of rain in recent months caused vegetable prices to rise sharply. Now, there are also concerns industrial water shortage could halt operations at some chemical factories. Yu-jin reports.
These days, it's easy to spot South Korean government officials standing in front of the news cameras giving worrying updates about food prices.
Because watermelons are so expensive these days, I think I need to buy one today before the price goes up.
The wholesale price of one watermelon has risen about 6,000 Korean won, which is around $4.7 from last year. Then how about other groceries? Although the country saw some much-needed rain across the country recently, there are some areas still experiencing drought. This has led to a surge in vegetable prices. Compared to last year, the price of most vegetables has increased. The price of white radish jumped 56%, green chili 36%, and garlic 63%. Green onion is up 86%, sesame leaf 28%, and potato 55%. South Korea's average accumulated precipitation in the past month was only 6% of what it was last year. Reservoirs and rivers have dried up due to the drought, leaving riverbeds dusty and cracked. Without water for greenhouses, vegetables inside have become hard as nails.
Through my 85 years of life, I've never seen such an extreme drought. There hasn't been any rain or snow from winter.
The drought, which started in the winter, is also hampering operations at factories. This is one of the biggest petrochemical complexes in South Korea, located in Chungcheongnam-do province. It's currently on high alert over the need to secure industrial water. Factories owned by Hyundai Oil Bank, Lotte Chemical, and LG Chem in this complex are searching for alternatives as the water reserve rates of a nearby lake, its main source of industrial water, fell to some 30%. Normally, when the water reserve rate drops to 20%, the remaining water is set aside for agricultural use. This means factories will have to look elsewhere for water to keep operations going. Yu-jin, Arirang News.
The South Korean government and the ruling People Power Party have called for voluntary regulatory measures from the cryptocurrency industry. During a party government consultative meeting on virtual assets held Monday, lawmakers and officials explained they are mulling over enacting a law on blockchain-based platforms. The The chief of the Financial Supervisory Service, Lee Bo-kyun, stressed the need for a reasonable regulation system to enable the virtual asset market to have responsible growth. The move follows the crash of Terra stablecoin and its sister coin Luna, which resulted in massive losses to many investors globally. Now, President Yoon Suk-yeol sat down for talks with the Prime Minister, focusing on cutting red tape and economy to rev up deregulation. The government will launch a strategy meeting. Yoon Jung-min shares with us what was discussed.
Boosting economic growth by easing regulations in the private sector. That's what topped the agenda between President Yoon Suk-yeol and Prime Minister Han Duk-soo during their first policy meeting on Monday, as the government fires on all cylinders to revive the economy. According to Seoul's top office, the South Korean leader called the regulatory reform key to economic growth, for which the government plans to launch an innovative strategy meeting at the earliest date possible. President Yoon will likely chair the inaugural meeting himself. During their closed-door meeting over lunch, Prime Minister Han introduced the idea of a regulatory judgment system where an individual or an entity could file for a regulation to be eased or removed. The system would employ a pool of roughly 100 specialists in various fields. Also discussed were ways to tackle high inflation, with the president asking his officials to keep all hands on deck to tame rising prices. Yoon reportedly cited the U.S. Consumer Price Index having risen 8.6% year-on-year last month, the OECD's average soaring more than 9%, and South Korea's up nearly 5.5%. And the new president made clear he would like to keep such meeting with his prime minister a regular event.
일주일에 한 번 정도는 손님을 뵈야 되는데 이제 취임하시고 워낙 바쁘셔가지고.
In clear reflection of the most urgent challenges facing the country, the inaugural regular meeting between the president and the prime minister centered on cutting red tape and tamping down skyrocketing prices. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
It's time for On Point, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into some of the key issues in the spotlight right now. While the global COVID-19 numbers are down, there are reports of reinfections in countries like the United States.
That's right, but how concerning are these reinfections, and what are other COVID-19 issues still remaining after over 2 years? For this, we connect with Ben Cowling, Chair Professor of Epidemiology at the University of Hong Kong. Good morning to you, Professor.
Good morning.
So first and foremost, we want to kind of talk about this reinfection cases that's been currently reported in countries like the United States. So how severe are the reinfection cases, and is this something that we all need to watch out for now?
Well, this is why COVID is not going to disappear from the world, because people can get infected again and again. It doesn't tend to be with the same subvariant. For those of you who've had BA2, it's very unlikely that you could get BA2 again. But of course, you could get something else. You could get BA4, BA5, or whatever comes after that. Reinfections tend to be milder, so there's not so much to be worried about. But of course, from time to time, there can be severe reinfections. So from a public health point of view, I think the government's going to keep a close eye on the level of infections in the community. But as time goes on, COVID is likely to appear to be milder and milder, because reinfections on average tend to be milder.
And Professor, well, based on observations from the United States and Europe, the BA4 and BA5 variants could lead to resurgence in other regions come summer. Well, how's the Omicron variant situation looking globally?
Yeah, BA4 and BA5 are probably the next ones to come through. But in South Africa, they just had a BA4, BA5 wave, and it was very small. It was actually nothing much to worry about. They've had a lot of infections in the past, of course. So I'm not sure that BA4, BA5 will have a lot of public health impact, but it will be the next variant that dominates an epidemic. We'll have to wait and see what comes after that and whether that might pose more of a threat. But I don't think there's too much to be worried about with BA4 and BA5.
Certainly good news on that front. But Professor, there was also the news of a newly updated version of Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine, which apparently produced an 8-fold increase in antibody levels against these Omicron variant. Now, could this be another game changer where we would just require a once-a-year booster to be protected from the virus?
Well, that's the hope. But of course, this vaccine is with the Omicron BA.1 strain. And it's not only Moderna, quite a few of the vaccine companies are updating their vaccines with BA.1. But you would know that we've already had a lot of BA.2 around, and now we're talking about BA.4, BA.5. So it's still a little bit behind, a little bit out of date. It's better than the vaccine that we currently have because it can give a little bit more protection, not only for BA.1, but also for BA.2, BA.4, and BA.5. But still, I think we'd like the vaccine companies to stay closer to the present, to stay more up to date, because in theory, particularly for the mRNA vaccines, they should be able to update those very quickly. It's just a matter of changing the recipe in the machine and then start producing again. And it could be just a few months before the large numbers of a new recipe are available. So let's see what happens. But hopefully we're moving in the future to a time when vaccines can be kept up to date more easily.
Well, South Korea's removed mandatory quarantine for unvaccinated travellers coming to the country. And, well, do you think this raises concerns over the spread of new variants? And do you think rapid antigen tests are effective enough to detect these new variants?
Well, of course, if you drop the quarantine for arriving travellers, then a new variant like BA.4, BA.5 could get into Korea more quickly than it would have otherwise done. But being realistic, I think it would have been very difficult to keep those variants out in the long term. So quarantine would have bought time, maybe a few weeks, without those new variants in the community, but it wouldn't have ultimately prevented them from coming in. And there's enormous economic costs to retaining the quarantine measures and so on. So I don't think the rapid test would be enough. And actually, I don't think there's any need to ask travellers to test before departure or after arrival, or to have specific conditions on travellers. I think it's just a fact that travel measures are not able to keep new variants out of the community in the long term. So I don't see the rationale for travel-related measures anymore.
Well, health authorities here in the country, I mean, they're deciding whether or not they're going to be easing more measures, for example, like lifting the self-quarantine measures for all the infected patients. What would you say is the key barometer for, I guess, lifting fully all these measures like the indoor mask mask mandates and even what I mentioned earlier, the self-quarantine for the patients?
Well, I think your Department of Health will be looking most carefully at the hospitalization rates and the level of pressure on hospitals. As long as that stays at a manageable level, I don't think we'll see too many public health measures. But if there's a surge in severe cases particularly, then we may see the reimposition of some public health measures for a short period of time. That would mean perhaps bringing back mask mandates, perhaps bringing back some of the other policies that have been used in the past 2 years. But I wouldn't see those policies just coming back for long periods of time, maybe just for 2-3 weeks to try and suppress a peak if there's a worry about hospital capacity in the future. But I don't think that will be a worry in the short term because you've got so much immunity in your population from high vaccine coverage, even with 3 doses, and also from all the infections that have occurred in the past, particularly in the past 3 months.
Well, thanks very much, Professor Cowling, for your insights today, and we're looking forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you.
And with that, that's going to wrap up the first half of New Day at Arirang.
But coming up in the next second half of our newscast, the government is pushing to regulate cryptocurrency trading after the massive collapse of Luna and Terra USD. Will it help investor sentiment in the bearish market? Well, find out more in Global Insight. We'll be back in just a moment.
Share South Korea's experience in tackling COVID-19 and introduce a Korean New Year. A Korean survivor of Japan's wartime sex slavery met with
extraordinary climate crisis and pledged to work with the EU to tackle the challenge.
The objective of its North Korea policy is
protesters gathering across the country to peacefully demand an end to hate and violence.
Arirang, what matters?
넌 볼 수 없고 가질 수 없어 뚝뚝 눈물 쏟아내도 뜨거운 자태 한번 비추지 않고 내게만 까칠한 그녀는 유명한 서대 보여야 어딨나 In your eyes 개와 함께 면허 디스토피아 내 발걸음 따라오면 유토피아 나의 내
I feel so good right now. Maybe I had a drink or two, but this somehow feels like it's forever. All my friends are here having fun and feeling good right now. Maybe this is forever. All my friends are here having fun and feeling good right now. Forever.
And welcome back to the second half of New Day at Arirang. Ukrainian forces are reportedly pushed from the center of Severodonetsk. Now, the shelling of the city has been ramping up for weeks now.
A military think tank fears that this could cause nuclear arsenals around the world to proliferate for the first time since the Cold War. Shin brings us the updates.
Ukraine is seeing some of the bloodiest fighting since the start of the war, this time in Severodonetsk. Now the epicenter of the war, Severodonetsk is also the last city in Luhansk province that Ukraine still controls. But the regional governor on Monday said Russian forces have already taken over 70% of the city. It's been under continuous shelling and soldiers have been fighting street to street. On Sunday, Russian forces blew up a bridge that could have served as an evacuation route for hundreds of civilians. Now there's just one bridge left.
Russia's key tactical goal has not changed. They are pressing in Severodonetsk. Severe fighting is going on there, literally for every meter.
Around 200 Ukrainian soldiers are dying every day. And President Zelensky says Russia will have lost around 40,000 soldiers by the end of this month. Meanwhile, the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, a think tank, says the conflict could cause the world's nuclear arsenal to grow for the first time since the Cold War. It points out how the Kremlin has hinted at using its nuclear capabilities against countries standing in the way of its so-called special military operation. Russia has one of the biggest nuclear arsenals in the world, with roughly 6,000 warheads. Together with the United States, the two countries take up more than 90% of the world's nuclear weapons. Shin, Arirang News.
BTS broke their own record by once again selling more than 2 million copies of the new album Proof. This comes as the K-pop band and their fan base ARMY celebrate the group's 9-year anniversary. Kim Hyun-sung has the full story.
K-pop boy band BTS celebrated their 9th anniversary on Monday with yet another record-breaking feat. New album Proof, released last Friday, sold over 2 million copies on its first day, a record achieved by no one else other than BTS in 2020. The album is also a hit online. The title track, Yet to Come, The Most Beautiful Moment, has garnered over 60 million views on YouTube. And the song debuted at number 3 in the Spotify Daily Global Top 200 chart, with over 7 million streams. Twitter also exploded with more than 22 million tweets about the album on the day of its release. Proof is an anthology album of 48 tracks, 3 of which are new singles, with the rest being BTS' most popular hits. When the band debuted in 2013, few had foreseen that they or any K-pop musicians would come this far. BTS first topped the Billboard 200 album chart in 2018 with Love Yourself, the first K-pop album to do so. Their first #1 in the Billboard Hot 100 came in September 2020 for the single Dynamite. BTS have also picked up an array of music prizes, winning Billboard Music Awards for 6 years in a row. In the American Music Awards, the band bagged prizes for 4 straight years, and in 2021 became the first Asian musicians to win the AMA's highest honor, Artist of the Year. BTS have also used their music to spread positive messages. They've partnered with UNICEF in a campaign to end violence and also attended several UN meetings to spread messages of hope during the pandemic. Most recently, they met with US President Joe Biden to share ideas to stop violence and hate against Asians. With their music careers snowballing into a greater success as they go, there's no telling how high this history-making K-pop boyband can go and how far their positive influences can stretch. 김현승, Arirang News.
Good news for all the Squid Game fans out there. The hit TV show is coming back for a second season. Netflix made the announcement on Sunday with a message from the show's director, Hwang Dong-hyuk. Now, Hwang said Squid Game 2 will center on the protagonists of the first season, Sung Gi-hoon, played by Lee Jung-jae, and the masked antagonist, the frontman. The director also thanked fans around the world for all the love the show's gotten so far, saying that although it took 12 years to bring the first season to life, it took just 12 days for Squid Game to become the most popular Netflix series ever. Hwang had previously said in interviews that he was aiming to release season 2 by Halloween of 2024. The South Korean ballerina Kim Yu-jin won 3rd prize on Saturday in the category Senior Group Women Solo at the Moscow International Ballet Competition. The 21-year-old tied for 3rd place. Runner-up was shared by Kazakhstan's Yelchibayeva Malika and Russia's Smirnova Anastasia. Now, the judges this year did not award a 1st-place prize. Now, the junior group, 2 other Koreans also won awards. Chung Si-hun won 3rd place for the boys solo, and Chung Yeon-ju received a diploma in the girls solo.
It's now time for Global Insight, where we speak to experts from around the world on issues making headlines. Luna's crash last month sent shockwaves across the crypto market as its sister stablecoin Terra USD depegged from the dollar and eventually fell from $119 at its highest point by 100%. In the wake of its crash that wiped out $45 billion across the 2 exchanges, around 280,000 South Koreans were affected, and the government and politicians have been jointly discussing measures on how to regulate the market. Well, a second round of talks on Monday at the National Assembly, attended by finance officials and 5 major virtual asset exchanges, produced a consensus on adopting a self-regulating protocol. But can the market be regulated? And moreover, can the broken trust in decentralized finance ever be recovered? To discuss this, we're joined today by Song Soo-young, professor at the College of Business and Economics at Chungang University in Seoul, and Omid Malikan, adjunct professor at Columbia Business School. A very warm welcome to you both. And well, Professor Song, it's lovely to have you on our show. Looks like your video has momentarily stopped a bit, but I believe your audio is working fine. So, well, thank you for joining us this morning. And my first question to you, actually, Professor Song. So the party-gov't meeting on Monday, it was aimed at setting autonomous or self-regulating rules for trading virtual assets, with the major crypto exchanges here in the country forming consultative bodies that would set more stringent standards on them issuing and also scrapping coins from their establishments. But it all sounds well and good, but there is still some skepticism, though, that because these measures are perhaps non-binding, whether they're going to work or not in terms of regulating the market and protecting investors from the very high risks that these virtual assets have. So what are your thoughts on the developments that we saw yesterday?
Yeah, so far, Korean government has tried to establish some kind of meaningful regulations over the virtual assets. The virtual assets are defined as some digital instruments which could be traded and and sold to the general investors. So far, the issue was in the United States, the SEC actually tried to to regard those cryptocurrencies and actually the stable coins as some securities, but actually they failed to win against stable coins in the last the verdict. So recently they tried to set up some rules against the stable coins, which passed some Howey test, which defines whether it is should be regarded as a securities or not. So I think currently the Korean government is wait and see how the situation is developed in the United States, and then also they are concerned about some repressed development of the digital assets in the in the economy. So that's because some younger generations are very interested in those areas, and those digital economies is regarded as some new way to develop the economy further in the future. So that's why the Korean government right now is a little bit take the posture wait and see.
And Professor Malek, it's not just South Korea, but it's all over the world, really, that governments have been looking to regulate the market. And, well, how does consumer protection for decentralized finance products really differ from the protections offered by traditional banks?
It differs in a couple of ways. One is that in proper DeFi solutions, there is no human beings making the kind of decisions that bankers do. The decisions are executed by code, which means that in an ideal design, you can actually build much more reliable financial solutions because it's easier to regulate code than it is to regulate people. It's just that governments and regulators need to become a bit more sophisticated on how the technology works and what some of these solutions are trying to do. After which, it should be actually fairly straightforward for them to develop rules that say, well, if you're going to develop DeFi code that makes decisions on, say, borrowing and lending, here are the parameters that we consider acceptable. The other feature of DeFi that is unique when you compare it to traditional financial services is that a lot of what happens is transparent in a way that, say, your local bank is not. So, for example, a banking regulator is always concerned to make sure that a bank or a fintech is not taking too much risk with customer assets and doing what they're supposed to. In traditional finance, the regulator has to rely on information provided by the company itself to do enforcement. But in DeFi, what they can do is go on the public blockchain, see where the assets are, see where the risk lies, and then quickly make a determination whether the solution is doing something that it should not be doing.
And Professor Song, well, there's been a lot of questions around the stability of stablecoin, really. And an influential lawmaker here, Antosu, he suggested that the term stablecoin itself was problematic. So do you think the stablecoin mechanism still works?
Stable coins are the cryptocurrencies which is pegged or tied to that of another currency or commodity or financial instrument. So stable coin works as some mechanism that is expected to stabilize the volatility of some cryptocurrency such as Bitcoin, or because the stable coin itself actually works as the mechanism behind the stable coin is very similar to the exchange traded fund, which is provided by some reliable securities companies in the financial market, and the sponsor maintained a certain values that has guaranteed the value of the ETF itself. The problem is in this stable coin, they are not required to maintain a certain level of the values to guarantee the values of these stable coin itself. That causes a serious problem. So to that regard, I think the mechanism behind is maybe working and maybe may have some positive aspects for the virtual assets. However, it is very vulnerable to the change of the underlying asset value, and without maintaining the value of underlying asset, that causes a serious problem. So that is clearly shown in the case of the collapse of Luna and Terra, what has been very prevalent, I think, for the coming periods.
And Professor Song, what was quite interesting was that Ahn Cheol-soo, while he did criticize the fall of Luna, he also criticized the previous government's rather reluctant approach to virtual currencies. How does this administration differ from the former Moon administration when it comes to virtual assets?
Yeah, actually, as I mentioned earlier, because even in the United States, actually, the SEC has failed to win against some indictment against some stablecoin companies, because virtual currency such as Bitcoin does not pass the Howey test, which defines whether it is an investment contract or not. However, these stablecoin, they have made some public announcement that they are going to use and receive some payment and fee. So that could imply that these stable coins could pass the Howey test, which determines whether it is investment contract or not. So as long as they are judged as some investment contract, they must register as securities in the SEC. So that is that actually violates those the stable coin providers violate the law. So that could then the SEC has they could impose some kind of some fines and fee, some kind of taxation over those stable coins. So I think in the previous government, clearly, because they are not at all very assured of whether this should be the stable coins should be treated as some investment contract. Even the U.S. SEC was not assured of the characteristic and the features of stable coins. So still, it is up to some judgment by the not by the producer or provider of stablecoin, but by the lawyers in the Supreme Court will determine whether the stablecoin should be treated as securities or not.
And Professor Malikan, now, in the months leading up to Luna's crash, there were questions around the stability of Terra USD as a stablecoin. And while the founder of Terra has been known for his sort of flary sort of comments, his interesting kind of comments that he makes, particularly towards those who question him. And well, in January, when he was asked how the Anchor protocol would continue to guarantee a 20% interest rate, he answered, "Your mom, obviously." And well, why was Anchor unsustainable? And do you think that the trust in decentralized finance has been broken for good due to this crash?
The 20% Anchor yield was heavily subsidized by Terraform Labs, the company that built the Terra blockchain and issued the UST stablecoin. And it was so high, and the size of UST grew to be so much that they were spending millions and millions of dollars a month to maintain this subsidy. So it was only a matter of time until they would run out of money. So it was a unnatural economic arrangement, which may have actually contributed to the collapse of the whole thing, because the algorithmic stablecoin model that they were trying has a questionable economic design. There are many experts within the crypto industry who predicted that it would eventually fail. Every previous attempt to implement a similar model to a stablecoin had also failed. So it was something of a confidence game. And because of the 20% yield, UST grew very, very quickly. And that rapid growth exposed the underlying problems with the design and led to the eventual collapse. All of that does hurt the reputation of crypto and DeFi to a certain extent. I think it's important to realize that this was a fairly experimental project. There are other stable coins and DeFi solutions that have been around for years. They are based on much more sound and conservative economic models, and they have worked fine. Even in the midst of the current severe decline in crypto prices in the last 24 hours that you reported on earlier, the other stable coins and the more sort of blue chip DeFi solutions have operated perfectly well. So hopefully that will help restore confidence.
And Professor Malikan now, the founder of Terra, he tried relaunching Luna, of course, Luna 2.0. But do you think that the Luna and Terra mechanism still works? Do you think stablecoins can really offer investors some level of stability?
So the new Luna actually does not have a stablecoin anymore. They did away with the UST part, which was the far more radical experimental aspect of the original project, which then begs the question of what is the point of it? If Terra 2.0, as they call it, is just another blockchain that developers could build on top of, well, there are already many of those, the biggest one being Ethereum. As for stablecoins in general, I think this is the end of that particular approach to stability, the algorithmic model. The several other projects that implemented have all seen their coins lose their peg to the dollar very recently. However, the other approach that my colleague here was talking about earlier, to building stability, which is designed, as he eloquently put it, like sort of like an ETF, where you have someone who's responsible for maintaining the peg by keeping sufficient reserves. In this case, it's usually the issuer keeps a cash reserves in the banking system or holds liquid, safe securities like government bonds. That model has been around for 7-8 years now, and it generally works. And it's starting to get regulated, including, as was mentioned earlier, in places like the US. So as the issuers become more regulated, I think users will trust their stablecoins even more, and they will continue to grow.
Well, I'm afraid due to time, this is where we'll have to leave the interview today. That was Hong Soo-young, Professor at the College of Business and Economics at Chung-Ang University, and Omid Malikan, Adjunct Professor at Columbia Business School, joining us from New York. Thank you both so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you. And my pleasure.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. An early heat wave has hit Spain as temperatures soared to highs far above normal for this time of year. On Monday, the mercury rose above 40 degrees Celsius in the center and south of the country, with some areas even seeing highs of 43 degrees. It's also the earliest heat wave the country has seen in 43 years. These unusual June temperatures come after Spain had its hottest May in more than 100 years. According to the Spanish Meteorological Agency, the extreme temperatures could last all week. The south of France is also predicted to see a heatwave from Tuesday, which could make the ongoing drought there even worse. In more climate-related news, a lake in central Chile has dried up and become a desert in the latest sign of climate change. The Peñuelas Reservoir in central Chile used to be a primary source of water for the city of Valparaíso up until 20 years ago. It used to contain enough water to fill 38,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools, but it now only has enough to fill 2 pools. The desertification comes amid a 13-year drought. Higher than average temperatures have melted snow in the Andes Mountains, turning it into vapor and reducing meltwater. The drought has also affected mining operations as tensions over water use grow. Meanwhile, on the Greek island of Astipalei, a week-long free-running contest wrapped up on Sunday. Called the Red Bull Art of Motion, the contest started on June 5th with 16 of the world's best athletes competing. Similar to parkour, free running is the art of moving in urban spaces and combines flips, spins, drops, and gap jumps. The event is made up of 3 separate competition days where freerunners filmed their most daring, technically difficult, and scary stunts. This year's contest involved 3 categories: the Live, Spot, and Exploration challenges, each requiring a different set of skills. In a tight points race, the UK's Travis Verkaik was named winner, ahead of fellow Briton Ed Scott. In China's Hengdao Heji Siberian Tiger Park, a 17-year-old Siberian tiger has given birth to 3 female tiger cubs and 1 male. The Siberian Tiger Park is also the world's largest breeding center for the species, with more than 1,000 tigers. It started with just 20 tigers in 1986 and has seen 23 tiger cubs born in just a few weeks since the start of May. Caretakers will now have their hands full as they work around the clock to ensure the cubs are not abandoned and are properly fed. Siberian tigers are highly endangered, with less than 1,000 left in the wild. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good morning. It's a mostly sunny start to the day, then more clouds will be moving in as the day goes on, while southern provinces are already seeing light rainfall. So 5 to 40 millimeters of rain is in the forecast through tonight before letting up from western regions. Now the capital could receive drizzle overnight. Meanwhile, rain-affected regions will notice much cooler temperatures today. But first, morning lows are similar to slightly lower than the same time yesterday. It's a windy and refreshing start here in Seoul, but it is far windier on the south coast and Jeju Island, with a strong wind advisory just being lifted in parts of Jeollanam-do. Highs in Daejeon and Gwangju will be at 22 degrees, Daegu going up to just 19 degrees this afternoon. Well, the chance of sudden rain lingers through Thursday in southern provinces, and it's going to get hotter again as we head towards the weekend. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe.
And that wraps up our newscast for this hour, but we'll be back tomorrow for our Wednesday's edition of New Day at Arirang.
Thank you for tuning in this morning, and do stick around for more updates throughout the day. Have a great rest of your day wherever you are. Goodbye.
Mount Everest, the roof of the world, standing 8,848 meters tall. Glaciers covering Everest are disappearing. A recently published report says glaciers covering the world's highest mountain are melting. It takes just 25 years for glaciers that have formed on Everest over the span of 2,000 years to lose around 55 meters of thickness. The reason for why ice on Mount Everest is melting is none other than global warming. The more glaciers melt, the more dangerous it is for humans. When soil and rocks become exposed due to melting ice, climbing Everest can be more life-threatening. Less water in streams originating from glaciers can result in water shortages. When there's not enough water to drink, grow crops, or generate power, local residents can end up becoming climate refugees. One more thing. Water from melting ice can cause flooding. In fact, flash floods in the Himalayas have occurred multiple times already. These natural disasters, dubbed glacier tsunamis, incur not only property damage, but human casualties as well. If we continue using fossil fuels and do not conserve energy, our planet will become warmer and warmer, and Everest glaciers could vanish forever. Protect the future of Everest. Save the environment.